Welcome to the Autism Society of Florida interview series. Each episode, we dive into real stories and meaningful conversations to support you on your autism journey. This month, we're talking about dual diagnosis and how understanding it can lead to better supports and brighter outcomes.
Good morning. It is October of 2025. This month, the Autism Society of Florida, myself and Lizardo as president, we're focusing on dual diagnoses. So we have different members in our community that don't just have autism. And the numbers of autism, as I have mentioned, have gone up, as we all know, but that includes members of our community that have at least another diagnosis, if not more. So this morning, I have with us a good longtime friend who I met about 10 years ago, as she was working as an ER nurse, and I'll never forget, you were wearing pixie dust makeup because it's a very friendly pediatric wing and they want the kids to, feel um, just try to cheer them up as opposed to, them being anxious about being in the emergency room. But she's since turned into an advocate, a school founder, and director of a therapy center. So, Mary Jo, please tell the audience a little bit more about yourself, your background, why and how you became a part of the autism community.
Thank you, Annette. I appreciate you very much for taking the time to talk with me today and allow me to share my experience and my journey. Yes, I loved working in the emergency room. My heart is always going to be an ER nurse. I always thought that life should be easy with a touch of sparkle, which is why I would always have glitter everywhere on me. I would love to greet the patients and say, okay, let's get you better and get you home. The thing about leaving the ER was you got to go home, but when you have a child with autism, there's no leaving at the end of your shift, as you know, and it's a 24-hour job. So at the time when you and I met, I was a homeschooling mom. I homeschooled my oldest and firstborn, and my second son, which is Malcolm, who has autism and other diagnoses that we'll speak about, and then my third child, my daughter Evelyn. And I worked as a pediatric ER nurse, and life was going by. And Malcolm has dual diagnosis, a number of them, as a matter of fact. He is severe, profound autism. He is deaf. He has vision impairment, is nonverbal. So our journey in the public school sector, which was all that I knew, I couldn't homeschool him. I needed help. And we would travel from a different public school every year. They would either put him in an autism cluster, but didn't meet his needs as being deaf, or they'd put him in a deaf classroom and that didn't meet his needs as for autism. We tried to go to the Florida School for Deaf and Blind, but they wouldn't take him because he had autism. We tried to go to the local charter school that was for autism, and they wouldn't take him because he was deaf. So long story short, how I became part of the autism community was just this fierce and really angry mom who was not satisfied with not having the resources and the support that I needed for my son. The dual diagnosis really played a big factor in the need for a school that was also therapeutic and also had the support that I needed as a parent and a family. So now we're going into our 11th year for the School of Autism and our therapy center that provides occupational therapy and ABA therapy. And last year, we've actually opened our daycare, and that serves children with autism as well, so they can get ABA services at daycare.
That's awesome, Mary Jo. Not just turning your own knowledge and experience to help Malcolm, but others as well. So um, you mentioned some of Malcolm's diagnoses, but I'm wondering, with your knowledge and experience, it probably helped him get those diagnosed sooner than most children. But the deaf and hard of hearing, I'm assuming you noticed at birth. But at what age did you get the ASD diagnosis, or any other significant diagnoses that may affect him?
Sure. having one child who was neurotypical, though I wouldn't have called him neurotypical, we were just going through the stages of life. I
Mhm.
had that as a reference point. So when Malcolm was first born, and I'm truly honest, at birth, as a nurse, I was doing all these little neurologic reflexes. So he was missing some of the neurologic reflexes that he should have had at birth. And I kind of cocked my head to the side and went, "Huh, that's funny. I'll keep an eye on that." But it was like peeling an onion, almost in a purposeful way so that I could digest the things that were coming that I didn't know was down the road. He was diagnosed deaf at 6 months and vision impaired about the same time. So by 10 months of age, he had already had a surgery for his eyes and was in glasses. He was already wearing bilateral hearing aids. And at 12 months, a lot more of the behaviors became evident that it wasn't just vision and hearing loss, because at 12 months is when he started flapping, banging his head, licking the grout lines of the home, and really not engaging with us in a meaningful way. So we made the appointment, and he was officially diagnosed autism at 15 months of age at Miami Children's. They were wonderful. But as you know, 23 years ago, it was almost unheard of to diagnose at 15 months of age. And being a pediatric ER nurse and being familiar with the developmental milestones, neurologic reflexes, I noticed that they were absent and delayed in him. So I was really proactive early on. I think it is very helpful that people have access a lot more now than then, but the importance of early diagnosis and intervention is critical. I needed CEUs for nursing anyways, so I took CEUs in occupational therapy, and I sat in on every single speech therapy, occupational therapy, feeding therapy, and ABA session that he has ever had. I even took the ABA classes. And I think it's really important for parents to learn ABA therapy if that's going to be the method of intervention that they use, because they're the carryover. And I did notice, as an aside, because I love to do statistics as a nurse, according to the CDC back in 2002, there was 44 to 45% dual diagnosis, where one diagnosis was autism. And as of 2025, that number has jumped up to 74%. And those, whatever the additional dual or multiple diagnoses are, whether it's psychiatric, intellectual, epilepsy is also very common and really
Right.
complicates things.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I definitely, because we have the audience doesn't know, but we have some similarities, as far as homeschooling some of our kids, and each of our boys on the spectrum is also our middle child, which I think is a blessing, for them and for their siblings. Um, but I don't want to jump the gun there, with my questions here, but um, you know, given, his young age with, you're receiving all these diagnoses, um, what accommodations, you know, over the years, earlier on and, perhaps to date, have you incorporated into your life to help him succeed? And, it could be just, describing a typical day from, when he was younger as opposed to now. Because I know, like I said, now he's got to be what, like 20 or so? Because I know Samuel's 19. So I know they're about the same age.
They're close. They are. Malcolm is actually 23 now,
Okay.
and
He's a little older.
time
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
flies. When I think of accommodations, I actually initially think of IEPs. So it makes it kind of hard because everyday life is an accommodation. And it was really hard to think about what accommodations we make. I make accommodations in everything because he is so severe and there is total care and support, and he is frequently prompted just to get through the day. So a regular day for us is I'm awake before him, but I wake him at 5 o'clock in the morning. We have his total care to get ready. We leave the house at 6. Because I have the school and because I have full custody of Malcolm, every day is take your child to work day. So Malcolm and I are out the door at 6 o'clock to go open for the daycare and the school. I have respite and personal care assistant. So they arrive usually about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. and they are off on their way. So they will do cooking and cleaning and janitorial. They'll have outings into the community. They'll go get the car washed or go buy groceries. But he is there with me every day until we leave at about 5:30. When we head home, he has chores. I have been really steadfast over the years that making sure he's so fit and healthy and strong. I
Hmm.
laugh all the time and I say, you're going to have to do something around here with all those muscles, because
Yeah.
you can't just sit here and do nothing. So he does laundry and sweeping and mopping, albeit it's not a great mopping job, but I'm happy to have the help.
Hmm.
Um, and support with I look at his strengths. He has OCD. So things are very orderly, and I use his strengths. If I'm going to say OCD has a strength, he keeps things really well in order in the house and clean and put away. So I play on that so that he has a purpose of what we do in the evening. Even though he's total care, I faded myself out with showering him, but still he needs someone to stand there, put the soap on and help him with those
Right.
intricate
Right.
body parts.
Right.
Um, so that's a day in the life of Malcolm. All day is an accommodation. And I'm happy to say, but we talk about the dual diagnosis, he does have epilepsy as well. Knock on wood, he hasn't had seizures uh, for about 3 years now. But for probably about 5, 6 years, he had those nocturnal grand mal seizures that you hear that snorting sound in the middle of the night. So there's poor sleep, neglect of our own adrenal system, our own health from poor sleep and constant anxiety. And I think that plays into the whole package of caring for someone with more than one diagnosis.
Definitely, and you touched on something I think is important for, you know, everyone to be aware of, even though within our, the autism community, I know that there are many others like us, but you were a professional before having children, as was I. We like to work, we like to help other people, but we can't do what we do without certain supports, because like you said, our children may be able to do lots of things, even though they're quote unquote, severe end of the spectrum, but they do need some, prompting, some a little supervision, whatever task that they're doing, because of, other issues, neuromuscular, or it's not that they don't understand, but that they may need some assistance. So, you use the term turtle care. And, I just wanted, our audience to understand, because, maybe not everyone's in our situation. So, it's just, what I refer to as, constant supervision. It's not that they can't do certain things for themselves, but you need somebody there, just in case. And it is great, and I think it's very beneficial for him to be able to go with you to the school every day, because it does give him purpose. It does, unfortunately, there are a lot of, as we know, there are very limited opportunities for children as our own, young adults. And, this does give them a purpose, and it keeps them busy, not just physically, but engaged mentally, emotionally, every which way. So I think that that's very important, for any young adult, but especially those with, what, limited opportunities that society has to offer them at this time. Um, so what, out of everything you've done for Malcolm, every way you've helped him, to get to where he is, what do you think has helped him the most?
Helping him the most. I would say there's two parts to that, and that one, when he was a child, uh, exposure being constant, taking him out to the community. Everywhere we went, he came with, and staying consistent with the therapy and the strict ABA and the programs. That as a child is essential, in my opinion. As a teen and an adult, that was different, because I looked at, your question and thought, as a teen and an adult, what has helped him most? And that has been that the caregivers have been different. ABA ended and it switched over to respite and personal support. And those caregivers had a little bit different of approach, and they are young, similar in age as him, and they treated him, still do, as a friend and not a client. So when
Hmm.
I see them laughing and they're teaching him how to dance and putting his hand on the speaker so he can feel the vibration, and he's dancing and he's laughing, or watching him play basketball, I just stand back and with my hand on my heart, and I'm like, oh my God, he has friends. And that was
Right.
something that Malcolm really never had, was a kindred relationship with a peer. That has helped wonderfully, just being treated as a friend.
Right. Right. No, that's invaluable. And you can't pay for that, like you said, that's
Oh, I am paying for
you
it,
are
but yes,
paying for it, but you know what I mean. It's you could pay
priceless.
someone and
It's
they still
priceless.
wouldn't
It is.
care. It wouldn't be,
Yeah.
they wouldn't treat him like a friend is what I mean. But yes, no, I know we have we have to pay for that too, unfortunately, most times.
It's worth
So
it, worth it.
now now I'm gonna go back. Then my last question will go towards the future. But right now, looking back, so go back 20 years, even a little more for you because, Malcolm's a little less than that. But let's just say go back, to his early years. What advice would you give yourself now as a parent of someone with these diagnoses?
I
Would you have
love
done
this
anything
question.
different, or would you tell yourself, what
Yeah.
what do they say? Hindsight is 2020, right? So what would you different now? What advice would you give yourself now?
Oh, if only I could go back in time, Annette. I love this question. I did a Zoom with parents of my school a few years ago, and it was because I was journaling and I was reflecting. So the topic for the Zoom was called Reflections and Regrets. And this is a similar question. And there is an episode of Big Bang Theory where Sheldon is talking to one of his friends, and they're sitting on the couch in front of a coffee table, and there's a bunch of trains. And she picks up a train and she says, Sheldon, what is it that you love so much about trains? And he picks one up and he looks at it and he says, well, when I was a child, so much of my life was out of control. And I guess with trains, I could line them up, I could sort them and organize them. And it gave me a sense of control in a world that seems so out of control for me. And I've always remembered and identified with that episode because I understand how out of control I felt in the early years. And my daily life was spinning out of control between being a wife and a mother and an ER nurse and a homeschooling mom and taking Malcolm to speech, OT, feeding therapy, ABA therapy, and implementing it and potty training. I was really falling apart. And so, in my feeling of out of control, I began to control everything and everyone, and it's an ugly beast itself. Um, I fought the therapies, I fought the interventions and the rationales. I fought with the RBTs, the BCBAs. There is probably countless BCBAs in Palm Beach County that hear my name and shiver. I fought at IEPs. I wanted, because he was deaf and nonverbal, I wanted his request, if it was expressed with sign language, I wanted that request to be met. I thought communication was so much more important, and they were trying to teach me the importance of denied access. So, whatever mistakes you make, ultimately time will reveal itself to you. So, the mistakes that I made and I look back on, if I could tell parents now, it's to learn the concepts, to listen to therapists, to pause that emotional response, because we love our babies so much, we will give them everything to the point that it is not in their best interest long term. I would prioritize and put in importance potty training, the importance of food exposure and nutrition, because that is critical. um, Denied access. My giving in to him because I wanted him to communicate led to really severe years of self-injurious behavior and property destruction. Really severe. I would stay firm. I would, if, as a parent, I mean it, I say it, I stick to it. That's what I would do. This is the part where I failed. Other parts where I failed is that I never took a break. I never left my kids, not one night in over 20 years. And it took its toll on me and my marriage. I did not have any grace or self-love. I was angry. And that makes for a really unpleasant person to be around while you're trying to control everyone. So that would be my
No.
advice looking back.
Yeah.
A lot,
No,
a
and
lot of journal books.
yeah, yeah. No, and I think it's important, um, you kind of, squeeze that in by a few different comments you made. I think part of it is, trusting your gut because as a parent, we do know our children best, I think. As far as their limits, their potential, maybe unlimited, but getting there. You see what I'm saying? So, because I've been in a similar situation with you, work with different therapists and some literally within minutes of working with him, I know there's no chemistry. It's not going to click it, forget it. And they might be great for someone else in a different setting, but
Sure.
not for him, for us. And then I've had other people who maybe have had less experience, but they just kind of clicked. And they knew, how to redirect, or, to give options, so it's, I think part of that is we sometimes forget that they have their own personality. They are not, like you said, just a patient. So we tend to forget that sometimes. Um, so my next question has to do with, now he's in his 20s, he's a young adult, you know, you know, you know, he can go with you, to your program and your center and your school. But as you know, that's not the case for most young adults. So, with that aside, because it sounds like you have, everything covered for him in the near future, but what would you consider to be his greatest needs in the coming decade? So let's say look at Malcolm in his 30s, or even beyond that, 40s, I know, you and I are in our 50s already, but I'm just saying, well, maybe not. Scratch that.
Oh,
You look great.
absolutely.
But no, but you know what I'm saying? Think of him, now. Imagine 23 years have gone by so fast, right? In the blink of an eye. Imagine another 23. So during the next 2 decades, let's say, what do you consider to be his greatest needs?
I love that. And I am so happy to be in my 50s. I'm loving 55. I think that everyone's basic human need is purpose. And I often think still daily, where and how does Malcolm fit into society in a meaningful way on a day-to-day basis? Yes, he comes with me now, but at some point, where is my departure from opening the
Right,
school at 6 o'clock in the morning? And
right.
where do I transition him into a social environment or meaningful activities beyond here? The DSM-5 defines autism as a social impairment, but we look at not just dual diagnosis. And I think this needs to be revised because it's more than a social impairment. We've got issues with communication, emotional regulation, safety. Malcolm still runs into the street, dancing in circles joyfully, but with no care or concern for, injury. Survival. We, as parents, consider, what if I'm gone tomorrow? Where would be his survival if not for his siblings? That's important. His level of independence. So for those who are diagnosed with severe autism and or with dual diagnosis, this may never be achieved, that level of independence. So it is looking to the future and asking, where does he fit in? What is he going to do on a daily basis that gives him personal joy? I want him to live a happy, meaningful life. So I am still searching
Mhm.
for ways to achieve that. There's got to be more programs, more activities.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a great idea, because people may hear us and be like, well, they sound kind of optimistic and they're like laughing and they supposedly have these quote unquote severe children. But,
Yes.
and I have said this before, you know, I think because, we, because of the way we look at not just our children, but our other children in our lives. And, you have to look beyond the label, or, in your case, labels, plural, so you have to look beyond the label. And, I mean, from what I have seen and known and hear of Malcolm, he's probably living his best life right now, like you said. And
Oh, for sure.
I had someone say that about Samuel, and I was like, oh, that's so like nice to hear, because we do try, and we just do it for them. We don't do it for any accolades, but it's nice to see other people realizing, wow, like, compared to perhaps someone else in their shoes, they're like doing awesome, emotionally, physically, every which way.
Yeah.
So I do want to end our podcast, and again, I appreciate your time with us. But any last words, or comments, words of encouragement, anything, you would like to share with, someone in the audience maybe who isn't, where you are or where I are in our journey at, right now? What would you say to them?
Yes, thank you. That's the most important part because everyone can share what they have or what their struggles are, but what is the takeaway? What can we leave listeners with that is encouraging if their children are still young or they're dealing with new diagnoses? I would say don't ever apologize for your child's behavior. Your child is beautiful and perfectly made. Keep exposing them to everything in the world. Everywhere that you go, they go. There are seasons. There is a season for all things. And just know that if you're in the season of winter, spring is coming. You've got to hold on until it passes. Stay strong. And remember, it's okay to be weak. We all have those moments. Take time for self-love, whether it's prayer, meditation, exercise is a wonderful release. If you have to set your alarm and wake up a half an hour before your child, you're going to be tired. You will probably be tired for the rest of your life. But if you do not take 5-10 minutes here and there, stolen moments where you just sit in peace and quiet, the minute you drop them off at school, pull over before you pull out of the road and just sit for 5-10 minutes and just breathe. I know people would tell me over all those years when he was younger, put yourself first, and I never did. I wish that I had. Create a perfect support system. That was how the school actually started, was I had this want need list and it grew from there. So while you may not have what you want and need right now, write it out and then set yourself to create it and get what you want, get what you need. Remember that there will be changes. The most important and I think hardest thing for newer parents is that people, and you know this, and that people come and go. Those first therapists that are there to rescue us and save us, when they move on to another client or they get married or they have babies or they move away, we are crushed. Don't allow for that. Just know before people start, they're going to leave you. Not because they didn't care, but because they have a life that is not yours. And that's okay. So remember to have respect for the people that come in to help us, have gratitude for the time and the gifts that they gave us, and let them go in peace and love and trust the process. Very important, and you know this as well, Annette, make time for the siblings. There's got to be mommy and time just with the siblings. So set up when you're creating that support system, make sure that you're cutting out time just for them because their emotional growth and development is very important as well. Remember that progress is not linear and there will be ups and downs. And 23 years ago, there really were not programs out there. There really was not awareness. So we've seen, years and years of autism awareness. I feel that worldwide, we have achieved that. We have autism awareness. But in my opinion, what we do not have is autism understanding and support, because that's very different. We can see a kid having a temper tantrum in a restaurant and we know that kid has autism. But do the people at the table who are watching us for too long, do they have an understanding of what maybe set that child off? Do they have the support for us, whether they're neighbors or family members? Neighbors and family members may not understand, and they certainly may not support. So I think that should be the movement of the decade. I really feel that we have to increase understanding and support of autism. And if this is the movement of the decade, we can start teaching this curriculum for middle school, high school, so that this next generation become the teachers and the therapists. Because we, as you said a moment ago, Arnett, are going to get older. And in my 70s, I may not be able to wrestle with and physically restrain a 30-year-old male. And if we do not train the next generation to know what we know, understand what we know, and provide the support that we need, globally, we have a much bigger problem than just awareness. So my final word is, remember to give yourself grace, give yourself love. No cloud reigns forever, and you must learn to dance in the rain.
I love that. And it's true. Enjoy the rain. Learn to dance in the rain. I love that. Ending on that
And drop
note.
that umbrella, jump in a puddle, have fun. And that's why we laugh all the time. You have to laugh.
Right.
You
Right.
have to laugh. I'm thankful that I have another day. However it goes, I will take another day.
Yep. Yep. No, and I think this attitude or outlook, whatever you want to call it, spills over to siblings. And I think that's a whole nother, interview podcast we may need to do, is because, you know, um, I've heard of horrible sibling stories, which, I feel like just given that parent of speaking to, let's just say. But then you have siblings that are wonderful, and I see them in the community with their siblings, that may have other diagnoses, not just autism. It's been a blessing to me for people over the years to come and be like, oh, are those your kids? And I'm like, yes. And they're like, oh, they're so good with their brother. And I'm like, oh,
Yes.
and I'm like, oh, that's refreshing and nice to hear. So if you're out there and you do not have anyone in your life that may have autism, to the extent we're talking about, and you do see, someone with them that's doing a great job, or, you know, um, just being a good friend, please encourage them, because it really means the world. Like I said, we don't do it for accolades, but like Mary Jo, you said, it's going beyond awareness, because, you know, every day is different. Ages and
Yes.
stages, it's all different. But I like to say, you said dance in the rain, and I always like to keep in mind, every storm passes. Every storm
Yes,
passes. So there's
it does.
always, the rain stops, the sun comes up, look for the rainbow. That's all I have to say. So we will
I love it. Yeah,
definitely
the
have you
siblings are
back.
great. I
Yeah,
wouldn't have gotten through it without my two kids as well. They have
exactly.
been the
Yeah,
most incredible siblings and
yeah,
supportive.
yeah,
And, when we say, when we're having a hard day, I always remember working in the emergency room because life is so precious. We see so many people pass in the ER.
yeah,
And I would always say, I will take a hard day over no day any day.
yeah. It's true.
Because if I was gone looking from above, I would be pulling to come back anyways. I wouldn't
That's
want to
right.
leave.
That's right. Well, thank you again for your time, and we will have you back for sure. So have a great rest of the day, and we have more to talk about. So thank you, audience, as well, for listening.
Thank you for listening. We'd love for you to join the conversation by sharing your thoughts and experiences in the comments section. Your voice and participation make this community stronger. And don't forget to follow us for more stories, insights, and resources.